and welcome to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. We're working on our applique project, Miss Kelly, and today I've got a very interesting video for you. I will show you close up how I made these little pieces that we're going to applique onto our background. And in this video, I'm going to be covering cutting those template pieces out and then the actual covering them with the fabric and using the starch to hold their shape. Now, last time in my last video when I talked about this, unfortunately there was a can of spray starch that sat right over on the corner of my table. That had nothing to do with the starch that we're using for this project, and I apologize if you took that to be the case. While I think you probably could use that starch, a much better selection would be the liquid starch, and I am using the brand Stay Flow. This was the only starch that I could find locally. I thought that my local grocery store would have it, but they didn't. I ended up having to get this from Walmart. But Walmart had plenty of stock, so if you've got a Walmart close to you, you should be able to find it. There are other starches that you could use, but this is the one we're going to be using for this. And this is a, oh gosh, what does it say? 64-ounce container. And I used 1 ounce in this pre-mixed starch that we used for the video and for this project. And I mixed 1 part starch with 6 parts water and just stirred it up. And I just used something to measure it and put it into the jar. And this jar worked great because this is a 8-ounce canning jar. It comes with a lid, so you can use it and store it. Frankly, I don't know how long this lasts, but I would think that you would be able to use it probably at least a week, as long as it doesn't get real hot or it doesn't begin to smell funny or get a mold on top of it. I think those would be the only warning signs that you would have that it wouldn't be good. And even then, it would still probably work fine, but you wouldn't want to transfer the smell or the mold onto your finished design. And right now, perfectly fine. Now, I've only did this a couple of days ago, so I wouldn't expect it to have gone bad by then. Make sure you close it up tight when you're not using it. And then for the tools that I used in this video, you're going to see I used a regular like school pencil number 2 or HB. I used a inexpensive craft brush. I think that when the designer of this pattern did her applique preparation, she mentioned about using a stencil brush. I don't know if that's something she used at the time that she did this pattern or not, because this pattern, she published this in 2010. So this is a pattern that's been around a while. It's not one of her newest items. And if you went to her Facebook site or her website now, she has newer patterns that she's working on, and I just noticed that she's using a stencil brush for her newer patterns. So I think we used a pair of scissors for our templates that were that are used for non-fabric purposes. I used a little small mini iron in this. You could use a regular iron. I just found this to be smaller and easy to handle. I didn't have a huge iron, and I could use it on my travel board here for ironing and have the workspace that I could wipe off and the travel board. Now, I will tell you this. I don't think that in any of my videos I have really reviewed this board. I do like it quite a bit. If I were traveling, it would be great. It has a cutting area on one side and an ironing area on the other. So you actually could do this whole project on this one board. I'm just choosing to use the ironing surface. The only thing I'll tell you about is a little heavy. It's probably, oh gosh, it's probably 7-8 pounds maybe. So it wouldn't be something you want to lug around everywhere. But if you were working in a different room, or maybe you were working in the family room doing this while your family was watching TV, that'd be a good thing to have your whole surface right there together. And then when you're done, you could just close it up and slip it away and not have too big of a mess. So now I'm going to invite you to join us while we watch this hands-on video. I am going to be making all three, well actually there's four, all four of these pieces. These are the petals from the right side of the design, and they all slip together, and then the stem, the top of the stem for the flower. And I will see you after the video. Welcome to our demonstration for the Miss Kelly Applique Project. As you can see here, I am cutting out the template pieces from our heat-proof mylar. I'm using a pair of scissors that I do not use on fabric, but they are good quality sharp scissors. Some of the pieces may be a little difficult to get your scissors around, and you may have to approach them from different sides to be able to cut cleanly. I think the secret here is cutting in long cuts, even if you have to stop and reposition the scissors, but they're long sweeping cuts as opposed to short cuts in different directions that stop and start. This portion of the video is real time. This is the actual amount of time that it took to cut these pieces out. This is to give you a good idea of how this process works and about how long it should take to do it. As we discussed before, you may want to put these pieces that you cut out into a safe place so they don't get misplaced. There will be lots of small template pieces along the way, and you don't want to waste time making pieces that you've already made before. Now, on to starch basting. We're going to start with the middle petal. This is the bright pink or the hot pink fabric. And I've cut this template piece out and laid it on the back side of the fabric. Be sure to pay attention to how your fabric is put down on the surface so that you're writing or you're marking your template on the back side of the fabric. And when you flip it over to right side, it'll be facing in the right direction. For this piece, it doesn't matter. As you can see, I've made a light pencil mark all the way around the template. You'll also notice I did not cut out the semicircle at the bottom of the piece because the next piece, the little green triangular shape, will fit over that. So there's no need to be finicky about that part of the template. Now I'm going to dip my brush into the starch mixture that I have made, and I did shake it up just prior to doing this. I will mention this is the first time I have ever done starch basting, so it is new to me. I wasn't quite sure how much of the starch I needed to put on, but I can tell you after this short session, I find that you need a fair amount of it. You want it good and wet. You don't want it dripping, but you want enough to get the whole piece there wet so it will form against the template. I cut off the very point because there was a lot of fabric there, and we're having to make a relatively sharp point, so we don't want an abundance of fabric in that area. I also discovered that I need a pointy tool that will allow me to grab a hold of the fabric and place it into its place that it needs to go to. In this instance, I use the tip of an X-Acto blade, but I think I need a stylus or something similar to be able to do this in a more effective manner. I also found I needed to add a little more starch to get the fabric damp enough to be able to fold over. Once I got that one side done, I moved it to the ironing surface. As I've mentioned in some of my videos before, you do not want to iron on top of your cutting mat because they will warp. And now I'm going to use my little mini iron set on its highest setting to iron down this piece of fabric. Now what's happening here is that because the starch is on the fabric, it's steaming it, so that does cause it to form around that plastic template form, and also drying it out at the same time. So it's just like a shirt that you might put spray starch on. You're putting something on it that allows you to make a crisp fold, and then the starch holds it in place. This is moving on much easier than I thought it might be. I was concerned about getting starch on my ironing surface, so I put a piece of cardboard underneath the piece. I don't think this is absolutely necessary because most of the starch is absorbed by the fabric. And often you'll see in the demonstration I have to go back and get more starch. And this is a small brush that I'm using. Here I'm trying to maneuver the fabric around the point of the petal. And this is a situation again where there is a lot of fabric up there, so you have to start your pleats down on the petal so that by the time you work your way to the point, a lot of the fabric is already gathered down further. But I was able to get it folded so that it created a point. And now the second side is coming together really well. Okay, we're going to move this off now, and we're going to give it a little more pressing time. This also dries out the fabric, so if you leave it damp when you stop pressing, it's going to want to unfold on you. If you get it nice and dry, it holds its shape. So it's looking good. First time through on a petal, looking really good. Just giving a little extra press here. And I notice I've got a place where it's caused a point, and we want a nice soft curve in that area. So I add a little more starch, and then I'm going to pull it snugly against the template and iron again, or press. I am pulling the fabric slightly into the template so it forms against that shape. Now we've got a nice smooth curve on one side, we need to fix the other. Now here we're going to pull it tight like we did before and press again. You want to be careful that your fingers are doing the job you want them to do, but you don't want to iron your fingers because it will be hot and it will hurt. So now we've got the piece all together, nice curves. We did not do anything to the bottom of it because, as I showed you a moment ago, that green piece will fit right over the top. And here's the finished piece. Not bad for the first time. And there's that piece that's going to fit over it. It'll slide right on top, so there's no need to finish that edge. It will be hidden underneath that other piece. And we will use that technique as for the other pieces. Now, as you can see from this section of the video, we're going to make the other 3 petals and the small triangular green piece. I have sped up this video quite a bit. It is at 3 times its normal speed, but there is a lot to be shown here, especially in these first few pieces that we make. How they're marked on the fabric, how the fabric is cut out, and then how to form your piece around that template. So I wanted to take the opportunity to show you all of these pieces in their entirety so you get a feel for how this works. Now you notice I flipped that, once I cut that out, I flipped it over to form it against the template. I'm going to let you watch this portion of the video. I'm not going to comment on all of the actions that are taking place, only if I find that a section requires a comment. So enjoy this section and I'll be back shortly. Some of the fabric, I've noticed that when you put the starch on, actually the color of the fabric begins to change, and I think that's just that the fabric is absorbing the moisture and the dyes in the fabric look a little more vibrant. It's a good way to tell where you've put your starch and where you haven't. Now on this particular piece, you'll notice that there's one section that I don't turn the fabric over on. Again, this is a section of the template or a section of the fabric that will fall underneath another template. So there's no need to fold that under. We'll just let it sit the way it is. It could be that when we start to put this together, we may want to trim it a little more closely, but there's no need to fold it under. That will also give us a little bit of room to play with the template when we place it. If it's not exactly in the right spot, we could just adjust it just slightly. So we're going to leave that one little section just the way it naturally was. See? The dark one fits right over that second petal. Okay, now we're going to move on to the other pieces, and I'll sit back and let you watch that. Now those little arrows that I put on that template piece indicated where the fabric would go under the next piece. This, in real time, this section that's sped up probably took about 30 to 40 minutes to get done. The first petal probably took about 6 or 8 minutes, maybe a little bit longer because it was the first one. And anytime you do something, that first one is going to take a little longer. But the more we do, the more we learn, the faster it will go. I'm finding that the points are the places that give me the most trouble. There's a fine line between getting enough fabric to get the point covered, but not have too much fabric that you can't get it all folded under. And now it begins to fit together nicely. Nice crisp point there, nice flowing lines. And again, like the other pieces, the very tail end there will fit underneath that other piece. Now this one I did elect to pull those pieces over after seeing how it fit together. And I did clip the seam allowance there so they would fit together. So 3 down, 1 more petal to go. Some of these fabrics had a clear right side and wrong side. This last pink piece didn't appear to have a right or wrong side. Again, you'd want to dry fit your template pieces to make sure that you're placing the fabric appropriately. I will make a recommendation. If you find that you have an area where you're going to have to clip the seam allowance to get it to fold into the template properly, you may want to do that before you put the starch on. I found that trying to clip wet fabric was not very successful. The scissors don't want to grab a hold of the fabric and make a clean, sharp cut for you. So that's something to think about. Oops, I think I got my finger there. And there we go. All 4 petals for the right side. And for good measure, we're going to put that green piece together. Now I found this one to be probably the most difficult thus far because we've got concave curves and convex curves, and they require different treatment. For the convex curves, like the center of the piece, you can simply make little pleats to pull the fabric around the template form. For the concave curves, and these are fairly gentle on these, but this is a small piece, you're going to have to either cut it very close or you're going to have to clip so that they will fit appropriately. When I finished this piece, I noticed that some of the threads on the very point of it were showing, and I more than likely will try to redo this one so it's a little bit neater, especially since it's going to be a focal point being in the center top of the design. Again, this is a situation where I trimmed it after it was damp, and that may have contributed to the problem. And there we go. That's it. We've got that side of the flower done, and we're ready to move on to our next section. Well, I hope you enjoyed that demonstration of how I made these pieces. I will say that after working with this little top of the stem piece, I do find that the very point here has a few more loose threads than I would like, and I think that's because I trimmed it just a little close there on the end, because it does have such a sharp point. So I think I'm going to remake this one, but it will be the same that you saw. I'm just not going to clip it quite as close or try to fold it in a little different manner. And I think we're going to find that as we run through this pattern that there could be a couple of pieces that we're going to have to work a little harder on to get just like we like. Now, the next steps for me is I'm going to make the other 3 pink pieces that go onto this. And then I'm going to applique them by hand onto the background. Now let's talk about that just a little bit before we go. I'm going to hand stitch these on, but if you're a fan of embroidery applique, there's no reason why you can't do the machine embroidery for these pieces. You would just use your regular technique and stitch them on your background that way. That's solely up to you, but for the purposes of my project, they're going to be hand stitched. I find that I'm a fan of the hand stitching, the invisible look of not having the stitches there, as opposed to the machine stitching. So I will leave that up to your discretion and what you choose to do. And I think that covers it for today. After we get finished with this portion, we may move on to probably, I would say, we would be moving into the lower 2 leaves of this design. Excuse me. And most likely we will also be making the stems. We may not be stitching all the stems onto the design, but we will be making those pieces for the stems, and they will be bias strips. I will mention again that I ordered the little bias bars that were recommended with this pattern, and they still have not come in. So if we get to the point that we're ready to make these stems, or I find that we just can't move forward without them, we will be using a bias tape maker to make those stems. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and see if they don't come in on time. So thank you for joining me today. I will ask you once again to like our videos and subscribe. And if you've got a friend out there that enjoys sewing or enjoys quilting or applique, please invite them to subscribe as well so we can grow our audience. We do have a community now that's growing, and I'd like to see that continue so we can share ideas and experiences in quilting. And feel free also to visit my Facebook page, and if you have pictures, if you're sewing along and you'd like to share the pictures of where you are and what you've accomplished, I'd be happy to see that. I'm always interested in seeing other people's work so that we can grow our talents and grow our knowledge in these areas. There's always going to be some trick that you know that you can share with me, and vice versa. So we'll see you again next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio, where we continue this project. Thank you so much. See you next time.